Samuel Alito apparently had a flag flying out in front of his home nearly 4 years ago that was upside down, an American flag upside down. According to Fox News' Shannon Bream, there's a reason for that. It's because, as she said, she found out from Justice Alito himself that there was a neighbor on their street that had an F Trump sign within 50 feet of where children await the school bus in January of 2021. Mrs. Alito brought this up with the neighbor. According to Justice Alito, things escalated. The neighbor put up a sign personally addressing Mrs. Alito and blaming her for January 6th. Justice Alito says he and his wife were walking in the neighborhood, and then there were words between Mrs. Alito and a man at the home with that sign. Alito says the man engaged in vulgar language, including the C word, directed at, of course, Mrs. Alito. Following that exchange, Mrs. Alito was distraught, and she hung their flag upside down for a short time. Obviously, that's the symbol of distress in the United States. Justice Alito says some neighbors on his street are very political, and he acknowledges it was a very heated time in January of 2021. Now, of course, the left is using this to try and disqualify Sam Alito from the Supreme Court. Dick Durbin says he needs to recuse himself from all election-related cases. For more on this, let's bring in the great Mark Paoletta is here. He's a senior fellow at the Center for Renewing America and the co-editor of the book, Created Equal, Clarence Thomas in his own words. Mark, good to have you back with us, sir.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for having me on.
All right. So usually you and I are talking about the left's efforts to take down Justice Clarence Thomas for some ridiculous thing. Now they're setting their sights on Sam Alito. What do you make of this?
Same thing, Vince. They want to destroy the court because they don't control it anymore. This is what this is about right now, which is shrinking the court to have the left-wing preferred justices decide some of these big cases. And what it shows is they're not first recounting what you were talking about in terms of the neighbors, these so-called neighbors. This is the left on display, and particularly in D.C., right, where I've lived for years. The left likes to think of themselves as the civilized grown-ups, right? But they're not. They're thugs. They're intolerant, right? And they do ugly things like this, like
hateful.
hang signs, hateful. Okay, so Justice Alito has zero reason, absolutely zero reason to recuse on any January 6th case. We don't know why Mrs. Alito put it up. She put it up upside down, according to Sam Alito. As you said, classically the distress sign. But even if it were about January 6th, even if it were about the elections of 2020, there would be no reason for Justice Alito to recuse, because you know what? His wife doesn't have what's called under the recusal statute a legal interest in that case. Okay, she's not a party, she's not a lawyer, she doesn't stand to have any financial interest in the outcome of the case.
Wait.
And this idea of a judge being impartial and fair, when you look at the precedents of what the left has adopted and what I think is a reasonable view, particularly in terms of the Alitos, they've allowed and they've supported, right? There's a case I talk about a lot because it was written on. There were briefs defending this judge. But in 2011, a left-wing judge, probably the most liberal judge in the federal judiciary, Stephen Reinhart, had a case that had to do with the same-sex marriage ban in California, right? There was Proposition 8 to ban it in the California Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
The ACLU, Southern California chapter, filed two briefs in the court below, the joint two briefs in the court below. The head of the ACLU Southern California chapter was none other than Judge Reinhart's wife, okay? Ramona Ripston, her name was. They filed two briefs saying it's unconstitutional. It goes up to her husband on appeal. And guess what? Judge Reinhart says, I don't need to recuse. My wife has her own views. I have mine, and I'm going to sit on this case. And the sort of the big dog in left-wing ethics, judicial ethics, is Stephen Gillers. He filed a brief defending Judge Reinhart with a number of other ethics professors and judges, I think, that he didn't have to. What Stephen Giller said was, a century ago, notions like those advanced against Judge Reinhart might have resonated, although wrongfully so. In this day and age, however, a spouse's views and actions, however passionately held and discharged, are not imputed to her spouse, and Judge Reinhart is not presumed to be the reservoir and carrier of his wife's beliefs. Okay?
So by this logic, so let's pretend for a moment that Justice Alito was married to an abortion enthusiast, that Mrs. Alito was super pro-abortion. She just thinks that we need more of them. If that was her position, Would he have to recuse himself from the Dobbs decision then?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We had a case, judge in D.C. There's another one. This is getting right to actually a justice, okay? When Justice Ginsburg, who I've written a lot on, trashed President Trump, candidate Trump, in 2016. Remember this? He's a faker. He's a terrible person, and he doesn't release his taxes, and that makes him a disreputable man, right? In 2020, what comes before her? A case on Donald Trump and whether he has to release his taxes pursuant to a congressional subpoena. And she doesn't recuse, and nobody criticizes her, right? She's already taken a position. She hates the man. You could argue with all sort of Trump-related things, but nobody raised a finger or a complaint on Justice Ginsburg. They applauded her for actually attacking Justice candidate Trump, and nobody, said boo about her sitting on that case. Related to that case, in the district court, okay, there was a guy who is the head of the ACLU. He's the national litigation director for the ACLU. Right? His name is David Cole. He's married to, get this, the D.C. Circuit Judge, Nina Pollard. Okay, when that district court judge rules against Trump on his taxes, David Cole writes favorably saying this is the right decision. Trump has it coming to him. Okay, and guess what? Nina Pollard doesn't recuse from the case when it goes up to the D.C. Circuit en banc. So when you talk about spouses, right, whether it's Ginny Thomas, right, or Martha Ann Alito, wonderful people, strong conservative women, right, they aren't commenting on cases, right? They just have their political views. But the left tries to disqualify their husbands, attack them for even having views.
So at its core, the view here is a misogynist one, that these men need to get control of their wives. That these wives are not allowed agency of their own. They're not allowed to have their own opinions. They can't express themselves. They can't have their own lives. And so what this is just the left's misogyny on display.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And with the Thomases, it's a twofer. It's the racism and misogyny on display, right? So it's, it really reveals and exposes the left for what they are. They don't believe in the rule of law. They don't believe that people, two adults in a marriage can have separate views on something and act according to their oath, right? That's the part that's kind of despicable, right? And in fact, Judge Reinhardt said, my wife doesn't have any legal interest in this case. Here's what it says. My wife has no interest in the outcome of this case that might be substantially affected by its outcome over and beyond the interests of any American with a strong view concerning the social issues that confront this nation. Okay, switch out the names, right? I mean, Martha Ann Alito was not filing a brief in the court below that was going up to her husband.
Right, and there's not, and there's no profit motive or anything either. It's not like she was making any money by flying the American flag upside down in protest of her neighbor's awful treatment of her. That how in the world could that even amount to a quote conflict of interest?
It just gets so tiresome, but we have to respond to the left's assault on the Supreme Court. Again, I'll give you another example because there's just tons and tons of them. And, Ruth Ginsburg's, Justice Ginsburg's husband was at a firm that routinely appeared before the Supreme Court. Okay? She never recused from a single case, right? He's a member of the firm. He wasn't appearing, but you know what? He's a member of that firm. That sounds pretty good. She raised money, right? She auctioned off a signed opinion in the VMI case, which was the ruling that women have a right to attend VMI, to raise money for the pro-abortion group now, and never recused on a now case or a NARAL case. So the left is absolutely, they don't believe in ethics, okay? What they believe in is power, and they want to take out this court because they don't control it anymore, right? For 50 years, 60 years, it's always been, no matter whether it was a Republican or Democrat president, the appointments, right, were just, not very good, sadly, right? The Kennedys, the Souters, the Blackmans, just think about it, the Stevens, liberal justices. Now, because of President Trump, right, and his appointments, we have a court that is no longer left of center or left, and the left hates it, and that's why they want to attack Justice Alito and Justice Thomas in particular.
And what they don't, you're exactly right. And it's not that the court has become like a Republican, although you'll hear that from time to time from the left. what it's done is it's become less political. The left has politicized the court for so long and used it as a sort of de facto legislative branch that they're offended that they can't do that anymore, and that the court would get in the way of any of their agenda items is what offends them. So, for instance, this very week, we had a big decision yesterday about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and it was a 7-2 decision. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote the majority opinion. On the opposite side of the question from him was Justice Sam Alito and Justice Neil Gorsuch. They were the two dissenting. In other words, they're not walking in lockstep on some sort of Republican agenda. They're assessing the merits based on their understanding of the Constitution and the law, and then rendering judgments. This is not the way the left operates.
That's exactly right. And I'm glad you pointed it out, because, these are originalists that are doing their best, their honest best, to figure out what those provisions meant at the time, and whether whatever's going on right now accords with that. And come what may, right? And that's, Justice Thomas has been pilloried for years and years and years for doing that. Some of the other justices now are feeling that heat, and it's important. It really is important for people to stand up against these attacks, because you're seeing it right now, right? You're seeing now they've gone into overdrive again on, we need to win the election in 2024, and we are going to pack the court. In fact, I think Hank Johnson, I saw, I'm traveling, but I think I saw a tweet from him that he started a new outside group or working with us. And the first thing is we need to pack the court. And so they don't, if the court is not giving them their decisions, then they need to change it. It's illegitimate. Vince, you and I grew up watching the Supreme Court disappoint us time and time again, right? We didn't go attack justices, go outside their homes, threaten them, threaten their children, march in front of their homes, try to assassinate justices, right? That is what the left is doing, because they can't stand the idea that they don't control this court anymore, and therefore it's illegitimate and it needs to be burned to the ground. And I'm not saying that to be sort of over the top. This is really what's going on. And, the justices have to live with 24-hour security. I mean, I know this. And the left is happy with this. They want to make their lives a living hell and their spouses' lives a living hell.
So I take your point, and it's a great one, Mark. And even if they don't succeed in literally burning down the court, which it seems to be that's the direction we're headed, as you point out, what they have done is they've definitely undermined the credibility of the court. They've gone out of their way to use all of their various media vehicles to tell people that there is no chance of fairness in the United States Supreme Court, that this is a failed institution that is out to get you. It is totally captured, and on and on and on. What is the impact of that when you make false allegations like that about an institution like the Supreme Court? What does that do to the country?
Again, the Supreme Court is our crown jewel. And when you lessen faith in it, when you make, it's not just that I disagree with their opinion, it's that they're corrupt, right? It's dangerous, because, I think there was talk at some point with some members saying you don't need to listen to Supreme Court opinions, right? Again, here's the rule of law, so-called rule of law party. They're not, right? They're a power party that wants everyone to fall in line with their views. And in the sort of short term, it's that they try and shrink the court, meaning try and knock off justices, pressure them to resign, to recuse, or, pressure them to not kind of stand up for their oath and write the opinion the way it should be written, faithful to their what the actual kind of answer is. So it is dangerous, and it's not going away. That's the scary thing here, is that this has been going on for several years. It started, back in January 2022 with Jane Mayer, who apparently is writing a book to attack the conservative legal movement. But it's just this unbelievable, unprecedented attack on the court. And that's why I'm pushing back on these things and writing on this. And I direct your listeners to markpaoletta.com, where I have a lot of articles, probably 50 op-eds, going through all the lies of what the left says, why none of this adds up, why it's in fact the left that actually does these unethical things that the left is perfectly fine with. So I'm glad you're focusing on it, Vince. And and we just need to expose why this doesn't add up at all, why this is actually just an attack on the court.
And Mark Paoletta, thank you as always. You always bring receipts on this topic because the left tells a lot of lies, and you cut through them so well. Thank you very much. Good to talk to you today, as always.